Welcome to the Put on Waivers Media channel here on YouTube. Listen, you got the Raiders, Raider Nation. You also got USC football, which is Fight On. So we have both of those on this channel exclusively. Right now, this is an episode of the Put on Raiders podcast. We talk a little bit of Raider football. No, actually a lot with Matt Holder. He is from Silver and Black Pride and also Tape Don't Lie. Going to start it right now. And welcome everybody to another glorious episode of the Put on Raiders podcast. I'm your host, Dwayne Douglas, and I am podcasting on the beautiful shores of the Pacific Ocean. Beautiful day, out a little overcast day out here in Southern California. When I moved out here, they said make sure you have a sweatshirt and a skateboard in your car every day. This is sweatshirt weather today, but it's still I can still wear shorts. As long as I can wear shorts, it's all good. As far as that goes. At RTPOW podcast is my Twitter handle. So right under my little box here as well. So make sure you check us out there. Also, great response to the Student Body Right USC podcast. So I really appreciate this channel. Appreciates that. It's Raiders, it's USC Trojans. So definitely check that out. And also not here today, but Ryan Holmes, RHOLM 22 is a contributor here as well too. It's definitely check him out. Thank you for those who are watching and listening to the show in Paris, Texas, Butte, Montana, and Atlanta, Georgia, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So appreciate that. Our guest is Matt Holder. He is on Silver and Black Pride and also Tape Don't Lie as well, with and maybe a future as a special teams coach with that last name. Matt, how you doing today?
Good. How you doing, Dwayne? Thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate coming back on here. Always a good time.
Oh, it was a good time. Your Twitter handle real quickly. You always have some good stuff, especially for the drafts.
Yeah, it's just at mholder95.
Cool. Got you there. And we're going to like kind of jump in here and talk about like maybe which was, even when the Raiders don't win, and it could be an eventful season. This was a very eventful season. I think that at least worst come to worst out of this season. I mean, they had the meaningful games in December and January, which is always nice to have. When you whether you break the team down or you follow the team or you're a fan of the team, they had that this year. But I think kind of the cloud they got out of was, and it wasn't, you can say what you want about how fair the circumstances were, but it was nice to get out of that 10-year contract with John Gruden, right? I mean, they kind of got out of it. And, because I mean, if you and I sat here again another year and just said, hey, 10 more, we only got 6 more to go to get him out of here. It wouldn't have mattered. The first time around would have been Mayock's fault, and then it would have been his fault maybe year 8.5. But kind of your kind of a rewind of the 2021 10-7 playoff berth Raiders.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, always nice to have meaningful games in December, and nice to finally get over the hump and avoid that last end of season collapse, which looked like it was going to happen at one point in the year. So, I mean, a lot of good things. I think a lot of things that they can build on moving forward. Guys like the guy in your background right there, Max Crosby, became a superstar. Unfortunately, that means he's going to get paid, but good thing is hopefully the Raiders will open up a bankroll for him. But yeah, I mean, I've always joked the reason why I love the draft so much is because I grew up a Raider fan, and September to December were never all that pretty, or never all that happy of a time for me. But April, we had hope. So this year was nice to see. I mean, nice to see them fight through all the crap, all the adversity, all the off the field stuff, and persevere and pull it out through the end and end up coming out on top. So it's an awesome year. Yeah,
a good year for them. You can say if I say the quarterback's name, then we end up talking like 25 minutes about him. But he did show. I mean, like to me, he showed some. It seemed like he had 2 drives a game, kind of start, one to start the game and one to end the game. So as far as that goes, do you feel like? I know there's always there's always rumors, but nothing ever comes to fruition when it comes to it. Do you feel like this is at least, there's some talks about extension. Do you think that he's going to be the the guy who's calling the signals next year. I mean, all this quarterback movement, I think, is just kind of clickbait for a lot of people because nobody talks about the salary cap and how it how it hurts both teams when they make a big move like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have many doubts that Derek Carr is going to be the quarterback for next year. Beyond that, it's definitely going to be a little bit of a, we'll see how things work out. If it were me, if I'm calling the shots, I'd let him play out the year and kind of see how it goes. From everything that seems to be going on, it does seem like the Ziegler and McDaniels do have like a plan for Derek Carr and some sort of extension, whether that be 2, 3, 4 years. We don't know at this point, obviously, but I definitely think for me, Derek at least has earned the right to play out this contract, like we talked about just a second ago. Ton of off the field crap that he ended up leading them through to the playoffs, which has been one of the biggest knocks on Derek his entire career. I mean, you also think about it too. He lost his best wide receiver, week 6 or whatever that was, and I mean Darren Waller played maybe a quarter or maybe 3/4 of the year, maybe half the year, something like that, with all of his injuries. So I think Derek had a pretty good year. I think from a leadership standpoint, he showed a lot. Again, I'm still a little skeptical. Still definitely think, the Raiders are in that point where you can do better. And with the salary cap, like you mentioned, we're talking about $35 million being standard for a quarterback. That's still about 20% of the salary cap of the whole salary cap. So that is kind of the enigma I think that they're facing right now. And I mean, the biggest thing for me as far as an extension, if it does happen, I'm kind of mentally preparing myself for that standpoint. The biggest thing is
like I said, mentally preparing yourself.
Mentally preparing for not only what I'm going to be feeling about it, but for all the backlash and all the things on Twitter that's going to be going down. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's more about the years. I think with Derek, you're getting into that discussion where is he going to be too old? When's that decline going to start to happen for him? So I think the biggest thing for me is if they can extend him, and if they do end up having to pay him a lot more and pay him kind of the market rate for the starting quarterbacks, at least if it doesn't have long-term effects and keep hurting them the cap down the road, that's kind of my biggest thing. Is if they can keep it to 2-3 years, I'd be pretty happy with it, satisfied with it. But again, if it were me, I'd let him play it out and see how it goes from there, and make the decision next offseason. But we'll see how it plays out.
So with we talked about Gruden being gone. However you feel, he's gone regardless. Regardless how what the circumstances was Washington football team investigation. He's gone. So was Ruggs. So was Arnett. And Hobbs is trying. Unless he kind of can get back on the road here, but it brings in new lifeblood. Can you talk about who did you maybe want to be to see the Raiders take as a head coach? And I think we can, and then we can go into Ziegler and McDaniels. If Harbaugh wasn't going to be available, I did maybe like the prospect of getting Brian Leftwich coming in. But who did you like? And then we'll go into who they have right now.
Yeah, so I was kind of in the same camp as you, where I definitely liked the idea of bringing in Harbaugh. He was a guy that, when he first took the job with the Niners, I was kind of hoping, somehow the Raiders would work their magic and get him in. And I mean, he definitely did a lot of winning out in San Francisco. I mean, one of their winningest coaches since Shanahan. Just look at the few guys they've had in between and their records, and after Harbaugh left. But the guy that I really wanted, the guy that was my kind of go-to guy on the open market and as a whole, was Doug Peterson. I'm not even sure if I might even brought that up last time I was on here, but for me, he was a guy that won the Super Bowl recently, had developed a quarterback, won a Super Bowl with a backup quarterback, which I thought was even more impressive. And kind of felt like at the end of there, got a little bit of raw deals out in Philly. I'm excited to see what he can do in Jacksonville. But yeah, I mean, like you said, I'm definitely intrigued by the idea of bringing in McDaniels and Ziegler. A few things. My biggest thing with McDaniels was, how has he learned from his time in Denver? Has he kind of been, a little bit less of the egomaniac, a little bit, understand that part of the reason why Bill Belichick gets away with having the personality that he does is because Bill Belichick has that long resume that everyone knows about and everyone can respect. And if you try and beat Belichick without having that resume, you come across as, or you can lose people pretty quickly. And I think that was his problem in Denver. So that's the biggest thing I think that I want to see from McDaniels is how is he at managing the personalities? Because I have no qualms. I have no doubts about him as an offensive mind. And you look at what he did with Brady. Obviously, Brady's a pretty good quarterback and easy to coordinate with him. But then he took that offense and got Cam Newton in there last year, or the year, 2020. And, for what they had their faults at the end of the year, but beginning of the season, they were able to at least adjust what he was able to do, and we're a decent offense. And then Cam started to have his decline, and then this past year, whole new playbook, whole new offense again with Mac Jones. So he's a guy that to me has improved proved he can develop an offense, proved he can put his offense in a good position, and no matter who's under center. And I really am hopeful from that point. It's just a matter of has he learned from his last time? Has he learned from his previous mistakes of as far as being the boss, being the kind of manager of people?
Yeah, I'm sure. For your crew, this is probably a better crew to be studying film for when you look at the offensive coordinator, the play caller, and McDaniels, and also Patrick Graham. I mean, I thought that I thought that it was a little insulting, a little bit by the Giants, a little bit kind of arrogant, if you will, to interview the guy. And for him, he probably thinks he's just as qualified, if not more qualified, than Brian Daboll, and just think he was automatically going to come back and be under Daboll. But this is what the Giants lost. Now what the Raiders have gained. He is no doubt a really talented defensive play caller. I mean, he was doing it with some broken pieces out there in New York.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, when they hired Patrick Graham, that was honestly, I got more excited about that when they hired McDaniels, just because.
Me too.
One of the, because I've been saying for a while, going back to the Paul Gunther days, as far as being like a draft, just get the best players. Let's not worry about the scheme fit as much. Whatever. If you're going to tell me that we need to draft players for a scheme fit, you're telling me to sacrifice talent. And then when I heard that interview with Patrick Graham, where he's talking about, his fronts, and if he runs a 3-4 or 4-3, and he goes, yes. He's like, you know what? I just want to get good players. I want to put my players in a position to succeed. I almost started crying. I was just so happy to hear that. And as someone who again is super involved with the draft, that's exactly what I want to hear. I just want to get the best players and let the coach use his brain, do what he's getting paid for to kind of figure out how to make it work. And that's kind of one of the biggest things I'm really excited about with Patrick Graham. I know a lot of people keep asking me about 3-4-4-3. I mean, the biggest thing is I'll point to that last interview of I don't really know what he's going to run. I think he's going to be a guy that he's going to take his personnel and kind of adapt his scheme. And obviously he'll have a few things that he has, his bread and butter plays and whatnot. But, someone who I think is going to really mold this defense to what it does well and what the players do well and their strengths, which is something that the Raiders haven't had for a long time, I think.
Yeah. And I think also too, with this staff, Gruden had a press conference. He said he learned all these different things, but then he hired a bunch of guys on his staff who were yes men, who weren't a threat to ever be a head coach. This guy, we could be here next year and Graham could be the coach of so-and-so. Antonio Pierce could be a defensive coordinator somewhere. That's the kind of staff he's brought together, not being afraid to bring in a diverse group of people, not only in the racial makeup, but also by age. I think that's a part of he has some veteran guys who are older than him and some guys who are younger than him as well. So I do like that. Do you have any worries about, I know Ziegler and McVay, they know each other very well. And Ziegler said the buck stops with him. Do you worry about this being more being like a Gruden Mayock thing, or who else is out there doing this thing that people don't talk about as much? Would be Lynch and Shanahan, because everybody knows Lynch is not. And if Shanahan wants a guy, he's going to get that guy.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely is a little bit of worrisome, especially knowing that they are close in their package deal. I'm sure. And knowing McDaniel's history last time in Denver, that was kind of a big part of what he did, is he wanted to have the roster control. It's definitely a little worrisome, to hear something like Dave Ziegler say something like, I'm the buck stops with me. I am the one calling the shots. I don't feel like we ever really got that from Mayock. I think that was usually not necessarily maybe explicitly said, but always kind of understood that everything was going to be John Gruden had the final say on just about everything. So I definitely think it's good to hear that. I think the biggest thing with Ziegler that I am a little bit worried about is his background, especially in the last few years coming up, was more on the player personnel and kind of the free agent side. So I'm not 100% sure on how, great he is as a drafting. I do know he did find a few guys in Denver like Demaryius Thomas and Chris Harris that ended up being some pretty good gems over there as a scout. So there is some promise to him. I think definitely the fear of, is McDaniels going to have too much control, is definitely valid. But we are getting that vote of confidence that we never really got from Mike Mayock, or that we never really got with the Gruden and Mayock tenure. So it's a legit concern, but I think it'll be mediated a little bit this year with these two guys.
Dude, and I keep forgetting that Champ Kelly's on this front office too as well, who was another guy who might not, if the Raiders do well in the draft this year and player personnel, they might not have him this time next year. Senior Bowl. I know you went down there a second time for you. I know that was like an exciting time for you and your crew. How that go? And can you give us some non-Raider names that kind of stood out to you there?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, one of the biggest guys that kind of stood out that I actually knew nothing about him going in was going to be Christian Watson out of North Dakota State. He was a guy that, playing at the FCS level was a little bit unknown. And day one, I think I went over there with the guy Marcus Johnson from Tato Line, and he caught both of our eyes right away. I mean, he caught everyone's eyes. He's kind of been the talk of the town ever since then, ever since we left there. And he's a guy that can fly down the field and run at 6'4", he can be a threat in the goal line too, or in the red zone. So definitely a guy that's intriguing prospect from that standpoint. And I mean, the trenches were pretty impressive as well too. There were a lot of defensive tackles that I think stood out to me. Guys like a Neil Farrell, who's maybe a mid-round pick from LSU, who sat out 2020. I think that's kind of being held against him a little bit, if impacting his draft stock. And then LSU didn't have the season that they were hoping to have, so he's a little bit more unknown, but certainly made a name for himself out down in Mobile. And for you LA guys, I know you're a USC fan, but I'm gonna have to bring up my guy Otito, and I'm gonna butcher his last name, Obagnia, but a defensive tackle out of UCLA, another guy that stood out, measured in with 35-inch arms, which is, I mean, unreal for someone at 6'3", and had that quick first step. So a lot of goods, a lot of guys that was certainly catching my eye and certainly fitting some of the Raiders' needs.
So I kind of list the Raiders' needs in this order. Offensive tackle, probably not right. I mean, Colton Miller's fine. Cornerback, defensive tackle, because they just don't have anybody signed.
Yeah.
If they had to play tomorrow, wouldn't be nobody there. Linebacker and wide receiver. So like, I know a lot of people have wide receiver first. For me, and I get it, because the Super Bowl had a bunch of really talented wide receivers in it between the Bengals and the Rams. But I just kind of feel like just watching, I'm thinking about it for the New England point of view, is if they take care of the quarterback on the offensive on the offensive line, that the wide receiver spot is going to take care of itself. And when the more and more I read about this offense, I'm trying to think about, like, maybe they could trade for Brandon Cooks, or maybe get Nelson Aguilar. Maybe that would be the move, opposed to going out there and getting a star wide receiver. But let's just stay with the draft part of it. Like, do you feel like there's an offensive tackle here that maybe they'll go on free agency, or but they do in the draft? Who's the guy who you would think that would be somebody they could kind of go after?
Yeah, I think two of the guys that kind of I'm pounding the table for right now. The first one's going to be Trevor Penning out of Northern Iowa. Not typical to think of a guy from Northern Iowa to be in the first round pick, but he kind of fits the bill. Is in my opinion probably the perfect player to play for the Raiders in the trenches, just because he's big, mean, and nasty. He's a guy that's going to finish blocks, going to look to put people in the ground, kind of that old school Raiders mentality back in the Art Shell, Gene Upshot type of days. And then the other guy at offensive tackle would be Darren Canard. I'm a little bit higher on him than a lot of people out there. I think he can be a pretty good player. He kind of, in a way, somewhat reminds me of a guy like Donald Penn, where he is kind of this bigger, front-beer looking body. May not be someone who's going to necessarily dominate, but is really good with his body positioning to help create rushing lanes. And I think it fit well into his zone scheme. If McDaniels is going to keep his offense consistent, maybe that's not the best scheme fit. And a guy like Penning would be a little bit better, who I think does a little bit better in the gap scheme. But to me, Kennard's pass blocking is a little bit ahead of Penning's right now. Not to say that Penning's bad or anything like those lines, or anything along those lines, or anything like that. But yeah, both those guys are definitely, to me, on the table. I think if you looked at the consensus, you'll probably see Penning a little bit more in the mock drafts as we get closer to the draft to go into the Raiders at 22. But definitely those are my two guys that I think will be there. I definitely think will be there and could be options. Maybe Canard falls a little bit to the second. They can pick him up there too. I'm
just going to do, because I don't want to go through all these. I can't go through all these. I can't monopolize your whole day. But okay. just cornerback, and then just for the fans, wide receiver, because we're never going to, ever since they traded away Amari Cooper, we're always going to be looking for wide receiver.
Yeah, I think one of the guys for quarterback, my guy that I'm pounding the table for, is Roger McCreary out of Auburn. He's a guy that's probably going to be more of a second round type. I think he's a little bit better than that. I think he can run with the best of them. He was playing against Jamison Williams, got beat a few times against Jamison Williams in his 4.27 or whatever speed, whatever he would run at the combine if he was healthy. But that's kind of as to be expected. But a guy like Jahan Dotson, who I think everyone knows can fly out of Penn State. I mean, he wasn't even fearing his speed. He was kind of getting up on the line and no safety help, and was able to run with him stride for stride. And then I think he's also pretty good with his ball skills. Does have short arms, but I think he uses them well and be able to get those pass breakups. So he's a guy that I'm really looking forward to. And as a cornerback, one guy that stood out at the Senior Bowl would probably be more of a mid to late round prospect would be Tariq Woolen out of UTSA. Another guy that measured him with some crazy long arms and really stood out, especially near the goal line. That could be a mid-round kind of sleeper type of prospect. As far as wide receivers, my guy, if they're going to go in the first round, is going to be Chris Olave, another guy that I think can fly. I think can pretty good route runner to be able to snap routes off in the intermediate areas, and definitely after the catch has pretty good vision and can apply that speed to break some angles as well. So he's kind of my guy at 22. I will say, with kind of to your point of maybe holding off on a receiver, I think this receiver class, like a lot of the classes that we've seen with wideouts, is pretty deep. You know, a guy like I just mentioned, Christian Watson, would probably be someone who they could look at in the second or third round. Jalen Tolbert out of South Alabama, another guy that can take the top off. That would probably be around where they're picking in the 50s. So definitely a few names to keep an eye on. And I'm kind of with you on the same board of, you know, maybe going after another need if that's the way they want to approach it, instead of and maybe holding off on a receiver, just because, like I said, you know, I do think this class has quite a bit of depth to it.
Yeah, we're here with Matt Holder, Silver and Black Pride. And Tape Don't Lie. I'm talking about the draft and a lot of different things with the Raiders. Just give me one guy who is on defense and offense who just seems like this is not going to work out well for them with this new regime coming in.
You're saying just one draft guy, or
no, sorry, just one guy on the current roster who signed who just feel like it's just not good. It doesn't seem like it was fit. This whole new regime gonna fit. Regime? Yeah.
I think one guy that I'm a little bit worried about not being able to fit would be a guy like Trayvon Mullen, just because I think he kind of he's kind of a guy that just kind of in general has kind of been a little bit disappointed. You know, I was expecting big things from him as a sophomore out after what I thought was a strong rookie campaign, for at least from a development standpoint. And as a sophomore, just kind of disappointed what didn't seem to really get any better. And then this year was obviously played with injuries. I kind of worry a little bit that he might not be the greatest scheme fit with Patrick Graham, you know, and maybe he's not quite the player that we thought he was a few years ago. And then offensively, the one guy that I kind of get a feeling might be on the way out, and then has nothing to do with scheme, it has more to do with his contract tape, is probably a guy like a Kenyon Drake. You know, we talked about Kenyon Drake last year being, you know, this RB2 signing that was way too much of a cap hit, and we kind of justified it to ourselves with him taking on the bigger cap hit with it being $8 million in this year. Well, especially if we're talking about extending Derek Carr and giving him a nice little pay bump, it's going to be hard to keep around. It's going to be hard to justify paying $8 million to your RB2, and I think they can get out of that contract with little to no dead cap, and which would be, like I said, it would be a little frustrating, because you think of New England's offense, you think of those guys that can make those running backs that can make plays in the passing game out of the backfield. But if the math just doesn't work out, then I think maybe a guy like a Jalen Richard might make it more sense, or maybe finding another guy in free agency or the draft that can be that kind of scat back type of guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield at a much lower pay rate.
Yeah, they always find those passing backs, they call them in New England, right? Passing backs.
Yeah.
The most annoying NFL story that you just when you see it in your Twitter timeline, you just scroll right by. Like you're so sick of hearing people talk about.
I'm gonna say, I think it was for a second the Matt Stafford no look pass, not that pass, but the people saying like if Pat Mahomes did this, like it would be all over SportsCenter or all over whatever. And then literally like for like the whole day, I saw it probably like 30 times that entire day. I'm like, can we put that narrative to rest that if Pat Mahomes did this, or because Matt Stafford did it, no one's talking about it. So I think that would probably be the biggest thing. Maybe going with a little recency bias with the Super Bowl being only a couple of weeks ago, but that was probably the one that I just kind of at some point was like, all right, I get it. This pass is amazing. Let's move on. Can we put this? Exactly. If someone else did this, we'll move on. And I think right now, Raiders specific would probably be anything that has to do with Carr.
Yeah.
Carr
and Devontae Adams.
Yeah. Carr and Devontae Adams. It's at that point where I'm just scrolling. You know, if it's actual news, like something about the contract, then
Schefter or something.
I'll pay attention. Yeah, something like that. Then I'll pay attention. But most of the time, it's at the point where I just auto scroll. I have my thumb on auto scroll every time I see the 4-letter word Carr.
Exactly.